Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. My name is Dave Widrelli. I am joined by Harmon Dial. Harmon, something that was said in recent shows in our chat was people saying, enough with the Rick Tocchet stuff. Let's talk prospects. Let's talk Abbotsford. We want to hear some positive news. We got about half of that equation right, because today we're talking about Tom Willander. And unfortunately, this isn't a positive story for the Canucks, and that's going to be a big theme of today's show, is that really it should be a layup when you have all this turmoil and all this talk of ownership, management, all this negativity surrounding the team right now. Obviously your head coach is leaving and they didn't want him to. With all that happening, such a layup just to say, hey, we signed Tom Willander, because people are saying like, well, now they got to sign Brock Besser to make sure that everybody's happy, and they still got to sell season tickets. That's an expensive price. That's a tough one to swallow if you're saying that we're going to overpay for Brock Besser just because we were unhappy that Rick Tocchet left. Like, that's not good business. That's not a good way to run a hockey team. But I don't know, budge on the 200,000 seems like not a bad idea at this stage. No,
100%. It would be a huge necessary PR win for them. And before our listeners sort of think, oh, they're just going to go down a negative path for the entire show again, don't worry. We're going to get into a lot of the positives around actually diving into Willander's game, his potential, how he projects at the NHL level. And trust me, there are a lot of positives to talk about on that side of the ledger. But before we get into that, the whole contract situation, that's something I asked Jim Rutherford point blank about a couple of days ago, was why has there been a complication getting him signed to that ELC? And it really does come down to those bonuses. At this point, it's not just reports, because Rutherford himself
Willander
both sides have talked about the bonuses being the primary point of contention here. And I'll read you Rutherford's quote. In short, we have a structure for our draft picks, and this isn't just about Tom Willander, this contract. It's about what goes forward. Who are the guys who we drafted after them? How did they slot in? How much do you pay them? You can't be all over the map and be helter-skelter. Had to look up that saying when you're doing these contracts. So essentially, in the Canucks' minds, they have an internal structure for how they feel bonuses should be allocated to different prospects based off where they're drafted. That amount and structure is a little bit below the current market climate when you look at some of the recent highly touted prospects that have come out of the NCAA. And really, I think from the organization's perspective, even the first time they were asked about this a week ago, they seem insistent on this idea that Willander is going to bend because of the opportunity cost, right? And Rutherford highlighted this again, where he was mentioning not only the making a few million through the next 2 or 3 years and starting that process now, but also highlighted if you sign for next season, you're going to be a step closer to accruing a full year of NHL service, which makes it quicker for you to eventually reach unrestricted free agency, which is something that players care about. And I understand that angle. And really, Rutherford straight up said, what I laid out wouldn't make any sense for a player to make that decision to not sign an ELC. And really, that seems to be their stance. But to me, it's bizarre that they're being this stubborn. In my mind, it's not worth it for you to hardball your top prospect.
It's about the relationship between the player. That's what it is. It's player and team. It's about that relationship. You're getting it off to a bad start. That's all it is. You're getting it off to a bad start. And for their reason, you're right. Like I'm sure they believe that. And hey, I'm not even going to sit here and say, oh, they have no right to believe that. But you don't think this is leaving a bad taste in Tom Willander's mouth?
Yeah, and the deeper this goes on, we know that he had the college option route, which honestly wasn't appealing. And Willander knows that. In that interview with Cam Robinson, he admitted as much. But the third option in all of this is potentially going to Sweden and going back to the SHL, where he would be able to play against higher competition, still develop, and he would be paid. Now, he obviously wouldn't be paid as much as he would be if he spends a year in the NHL, but it's a lot better than going back to college where he wouldn't be making any money.
Let's lay out the timeline here as well, right? Like there was some quotes over the weekend. We wanted to break them down earlier this week, but I'm sure you've heard there was some news that we had to react to. So we had to bump the Willander episode. And this is it. This is the Willander episode. But this is what Tom Willander had to say in an interview with Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects. You broke it down, Harmy. You mentioned that. This one came out on Saturday. This is what Cam wrote, and here's the Willander quote as well. Cam wrote, he could have been in Abbotsford actively playing in the AHL playoffs. He could have potentially made his NHL debut earlier this month after BU's season came to an end in the NCAA championship game. Instead, Willander remains unsure where he'll play next season, stuck in a contract dispute with the Canucks over a standard set of bonuses on his entry-level contract. Willander said it's been his simple ask, put the bonuses in the entry-level deal. He says he never asked for the Canucks to burn the first year of his entry-level deal or promise NHL playing time immediately. No, we didn't ask for anything like that, Willander said, speaking via phone Friday afternoon. And at the same time, Willander was honoring one of the Canucks' requests. It's why he didn't join the national team until recently as contract negotiations dragged on with Vancouver. He said, they asked us earlier in the season. The Canucks didn't want us to play there. But then as time moved on, it became viable. So we decided, okay, it could be fun to play games with really good players. Right now, that's where Tom Willander is. He's trying to make Sweden for the national team for the IIHF World Championships. This goes on. Willander talks about college hockey and how he thinks he's basically not done with the league, but he did say, this is what he said. He said, college hockey's sick. It's a lot of fun. You're all the same age and living with each other, just you and the boys having fun every day of the week. It's a good league, but you can still feel that it isn't pro yet. That sounds like a player that looks at the NCAA as part of his past, not his future. Does he believe he's outgrown what college hockey can provide moving forward? Yeah, I do, Willander said. A little bit, anyway. I don't think I'm in any way too good for the league, but thinking about optimizing development, I don't know if that's what I need. It might not be the perfect spot for me anymore. So it's no longer the perfect spot. He could go to the SHL, could go to the NCAA. This is where Willander carefully chooses his words. The season is still going for me with the national program. I haven't really sat down and thought about it too much with regards to where he's going to play next year. And what if Vancouver called today with a sufficient offer? Would he hop on a plane to Abbotsford to join the AHL playoff run, which may or may not didn't end, to join the AHL playoff run? He said, I haven't even thought about it hypothetically because it's not close to being a done deal. Look, you just said it. Canucks seem like they're ready to wait for him to bend. That doesn't sound like a guy ready to bend or that he's going to bend.
Yeah, and really, when two sides are in a stalemate like this, it often takes getting closer to the actual deadline where both sides need to make a decision for one side to blink. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier for both sides to sort of play it cool when you've still got weeks and months before a decision actually has to be made. But once you get closer to that deadline, that's what forces decisions. That's why sometimes contract negotiations for pending UFAs, a lot of those contracts get done just prior to that trade deadline, because that's where both sides realize, okay, the possibility of actually getting traded becomes a lot more real in that instance. So we'll see. It could still take time to play out and resolve, and ultimately I still think it's more likely than not that he eventually does sign an ELC to play here next season, but it just doesn't make sense for it to drag on this long and for it to potentially start the relationship on a sour note.
Now, people are throwing out the theory in the chat as well. Where was it? You and Jacob were the first ones to bring this up to me, and I totally buy it. You guys thought of it before I did. One of the rare times I don't beat you to a take like this. But the line change in the chat, that's Tyler, regular listener of the show. He said, Willander and his camp aren't even asking for the max bonuses. Seems like management are trying to paint him as the bad guy and set up for a trade. That's what you and Jacob suggested to me. I think you guys might be onto something, that it might get to this point where the team just says, look, we had to trade him. He didn't want to sign.
Honestly, a week and a half ago, and look, this isn't anything I've heard. A very important caveat before I go on further. And I'm not accusing the Canucks of necessarily doing this, but the thought has crept into the back of my mind that, hey, what if the organization looked at the goals they need to accomplish this summer, notably acquiring a top 6 centerman, thought deeply about what is it going to cost asset wise to actually get and acquire that caliber of top six center, realize that it probably, or I shouldn't say probably, possibly involves shipping out Willander, and went, that's going to be a tough sell in this market. So that further incentivizes us to dig our heels in. Not that, okay, we think we're going to trade him, so we're intentionally not going to sign him, but more from the standpoint of, well, we can afford to play hardball because it doesn't actually hurt us that much, because it can prep the fan base for the possibility of us potentially having to move him. Because think about what happens when you have a team in a situation like the Canucks at the end of this past season, where you're missing the playoffs, the last handful of games are relatively meaningless. The most exciting thing for any team in that situation is to have NCAA prospects sign, join your team at the end of the year, and do the Brock Besser thing, right? Give hope, play a few NHL games down the stretch. And what would have happened, obviously, is Willander would have signed, maybe played an NHL game or two, or if the idea was ELC starts next season, go down to Abbotsford, play in a significant role on a talented AHL team that's going to go on a deep playoff run. We all would have spent a week on basically every podcast in this market dissecting Willander, his play, and hyping him up. The casual fans would have been getting excited about him, and then it becomes harder to move him optics wise, because this is a guy that just as recently as a couple months ago, this fan base was extra excited about. So that's something that, again, I'm not reporting any of this, and I'm not accusing them of, oh, they're not signing him because they want to trade him. But you can, if your management, afford to play hardball and really dig your heels in a little bit more stubbornly when you know that he might be a trade chip in the summer anyway.
You're so much more careful with your words when
Yeah.
it comes to stuff like that. It's so funny. You're just so careful. I love it.
Because I first had this thought a while ago too, and I was talking to Harm about it in the studio after one of our shows, and I would not have been nearly as careful and eloquent in speaking about it as Harm was. But yeah, like when I think about it, you know, if you're going to make a trade for a top six center, a right shot defenseman with a pretty high floor like Willander has is probably the kind of piece you're going to have to use. And I'm not saying they should trade him or they have to trade him or that they're trying to trade him. I'm just saying that if they had to, if he was a piece in a trade, you know, if he's not signed yet, I feel like that is probably an easier pill to swallow for a lot of fans than if he's already signed and, as Harm mentioned, is playing for Abbotsford in playoff games and getting hyped up a little bit more. So it's probably not intentional. Like they're not putting on the tinfoil hat and we're going to make Willander the villain. No, that's not what's going on here. But I think Harm has absolutely got a good point that, you know, they're in a position where they can be playing hardball and make Willander come down to what they want in an ELC, because he might have to be a piece that they look at moving in a trade.
Two additional thoughts. First, I think it was an excellent decision by Willander to speak and give his perspective to clarify in that interview with Ken Robinson that, hey, this isn't about playing time. It isn't about
the AHL,
not about the AHL or when the ELC is going to start or anything like that, just the bonuses. Because originally when management made those comments on Monday, there was at least some thought in the fan base about, oh, is he being a little bit difficult to deal with? An interview like that clarifies that, and I think shifts the focus back on management for why haven't they been able to step up and get the ELC done. Secondly, you would have never expected Willander to be difficult to deal with anyway, because even before the Canucks drafted him, I went to the draft combine in Buffalo a couple of years ago, which was in May, I believe, May or early June. I had a chance to talk to Willander, just like not a formal interview setting, but just met him, talked for a few minutes because I'd suspected that he was a prospect the Canucks were interested in, and he told me, yeah, the Canucks took me out for dinner. Even in just like the five-ish minutes that I spoke to him, I was blown away by how eloquent he was, humble, confident. Zero indication that this is going to be the type of character that gives any organization troubles. He came across as a first-class individual, and sometimes you can suss out with players or prospects who's putting on the good boy persona versus who is actually just like genuinely a salt of the earth person. And you could tell this was genuinely who Willander is. It wasn't just a front or an act to come across in a positive light. And during that combine week, there was a lot of buzz about how well he interviewed with a bunch of teams, not just the Canucks. So the idea of him being difficult to work with and him somehow being a villain in this situation and being reluctant to sign, that never made sense as a theory anyway, because of how good and well respected of a person he is.
You want to talk about the player too, how good the player is. You've done a deep dive, you've done the video work. Let's talk about Tom Willander. Okay, I shouldn't say what are the Canucks getting in this player. What would the Canucks get in this player the second they sign that ELC?
Yeah, he's interesting because when you watch BU play, and if you were, let's say, a really casual hockey fan and didn't know Tom Willander was necessarily this blue chip prospect, he may not stand out to you, right? Because he's not this flashy offensive driver, but when you specifically key in on his game, he's rock solid defensively. He plays this poised, polished, efficient style. And the first thing that stands out is how well he defends. He's been described as a two-way defenseman. I would say he definitely leans more towards the defensive shutdown side of the game. He's a first unit PK guy. He eats up a ton of defensive zone starts. When BU is leading in games and protecting leads in the third period, he is logging a ton of minutes in those situations. And what strikes you is how rarely he makes mistakes or has a bad game. That's the tough part sometimes for defensemen, is in terms of evaluating in small samples, is if you watch him for only a few games, you may go, oh, this guy doesn't stand out necessarily, but you watch him continually, and just like, this guy never makes mistakes. He always makes the right plays. And defensively, it is really tough for opponents to get to the inside or create quality chances when he's out on the ice. He's got a long wingspan, an active defensive stick. His skating is his best asset, and that definitely helps him in terms of closing gaps and stepping up. He defends a rush really well because of how agile he is at pivoting, right? It's difficult sometimes for defensemen in certain awkward spots when, let's say, there's a turnover that somebody else on your team makes, to sort of recover. And let's say there's an attacker coming at you with speed and you've got to pivot and turn around. Sometimes defensemen get caught flat-footed. Willander rarely gets caught flat-footed. He recovers exceptionally well in those situations. So that's the first thing that stands out when you watch him play, is just how polished and mistake-free and reliable he is defensively.
Harm, you said that was going to be a positive, but it's all clouded by the negative that they might not actually get this player. This player who you say, look, we say Sweet Wheels Niels? Sweet Wheels Willie.
Butchered that, I'm not gonna lie.
It works. Did you have anything else you want to say about Willander? We got this comment from Karn. He said, I don't want to give up a prospect like Willander. If we give him up in less than 5 years, we will be looking to add someone like him. Harmon, it wasn't that long ago that you and I were talking about, oh, okay, well, if the Canucks want to compete, they're going to need a guy like Tom Willander coming in and playing impact minutes in the top four on an ELC. It wasn't that long ago we were having that conversation. In your mind, like, I guess it goes back to the conversation of you have to give to get, right? Like, you have to give up something to get something, and this team obviously needs a top six center.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to trade Tom Willander, if I'm being totally honest with you, but what else? Who else are you realistically going to trade that is going to land you that that top six center? And of course, it has to be the right player in terms of age, right? You don't want to acquire a centerman in his 30s or somebody who you look at as not having a long runway in terms of their prime years. You want somebody that's on a relatively good contract and locked up for a reasonable amount of time, not just a year or two. It would have to be the right sort of fit. But again, if you want a top six center on a good contract in his prime, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And this organization just doesn't have many of those types of assets to get a deal done. And this is where, like, for me, Willander projects as sort of like a number 3-4 defenseman. I don't expect him to necessarily be a true talent top pair guy because I don't see the offensive upside in his game, right? Like, for me, I don't even know if he's a power play 2 guy at the NHL level, to be totally honest with you. I think in terms of offensive ability, he's probably closer to like the Marcus Pettersson, Tyler Myers tier of defenseman, where he's not a black hole offensively. He can make plays, but watching him at BU rarely stood out offensively. And that's okay because he's so polished and sound defensively, and he's on a juggernaut BU team where he doesn't need to create a lot offensively. But even at the college level, he was power play too because BU has Cole Hudson. And Cole Hudson looks a lot like Lane Hudson in terms of how dynamic and fun and creative he is. But Willander is rarely involved in manufacturing offense himself. He's more of a support piece. And so because of that, I don't necessarily see him being this like top pair, like star ceiling type of prospect. And that's why I also wouldn't be surprised if the Canucks look at Willander and go, he's going to be a mainstay top 4 defenseman in the NHL for a really long time, just because of his athletic tools, because of the size, because of the skating, because of the smarts. But our blue line is a strength relative to the rest of our roster right now because we've got Quinn, we've got Hronek, we've got Marcus Pettersson, we still have Tyler Myers, we have DPD coming. And we so badly need top 6 help now because the motive is to keep Quinn. That what other option do we have?
This one from Kevin Terrian on Facebook. He said, for once the team is a stable decor and going forward, Willander should be a long-term good player for Vancouver. It would be a poor choice for management to drag this out. A lot of people don't want to lose Willander. Others are saying, yeah, get the trade done. Go get someone. Irfan Shahid asked this in all caps. I think it was an accident. In all caps, he wrote, and I won't yell it. He said, Harm, who would you trade for if they give up a Willander type? Is there anyone you're thinking of? And then, hey, Trevor Zegras got mentioned in the chat.
I don't mean to cop out, but I still want to do my proper deep dive into the center market because I'll be honest, right now, there isn't a realistically available center that I would look at and go, oh, I'd package Willander in a move for this guy, right? So
mine's Dylan Larkin.
But I was just gonna say Dylan Larkin in the long shot of a possibility that he is really upset in Detroit and wants out, and he's somehow available, then yeah, absolutely. You take Willander, you build a package around him, whatever else it takes, and 100% you take a run at Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin is unbelievable. He'd be a number 1 center on a lot of teams. He's somewhere, I would argue, between the 15th to 20th best center in the NHL. And all of a sudden, a 1-2 punch of Pettersson, if he bounces back, and Dylan Larkin has a high ceiling there. But it, of course, is predicated on Larkin would need to want out, and that's a bit of a long shot. Barzal's in a similar sort of boat where I don't think the Islanders are realistically going to shop him or be open to it. But if they are open to it, then yeah, you would 100% look at Willander and I would go, yeah, package him to go and get Matt Barzal. But outside of those 2 guys, like I wouldn't be chomping at the bit to build a package around Willander for Trevor Zegras, for example.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like Trevor Zegras. I've talked about this before. Give me some Dylan Larkin, though. Get me some Dylan Larkin. This is an interesting one. I can't read your name. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I can. It's from a person whose name starts with cynical. And they wrote, how much different is our timeline if they had traded Miller instead of Bo Horvat? Let's make that the focus of anyone else, which we're going to get to shortly. But first, let's get to our poll question, which is Tom Willander related, and it is brought to you by Pacific Toyota Dealers, who want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X, an SUV packed with plenty of space. The BZ4X can handle any terrain and can take you from the city to the slopes. It's backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota, and if you're driving a BZ4X, you get access to HOV lanes even if you're driving alone. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives, and now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. All right, our poll question today. Well, can I say today? It was old, but it was about Tom Willander, and we had to go back. We used an old poll question because we never actually talked about it on the show, but our poll question was, would you be okay with the Canucks trading Tom Willander for center help this summer? 58.9% say yes, 41.1% say no. Harm, I think both you and I are in the camp of show me who the center is, and then let's talk. But I'm open to it. I'm certainly open to it.
Yeah, and it sort of depends to where I could see management looking at Willander and DPD. And of course, DPD is a lefty, but looking at, okay, here are two physical defensive defensemen, really promising prospects, and going, probably going to have to move one of them to go and get the center we want. Willander, because of the pedigree, being a number 11 pick, higher profile guy, prominent role at the World Juniors, he probably has more trade value. But internally, if you view them as having a similar ceiling in terms of what they're actually project as at the NHL level over the next 5 to 10 years, then you may look at Willander and go, it makes a lot more sense to move this guy who his potential might be similar to DPD's, but his Willander's trade value is a lot higher. So I could see that sort of being the thought process there, because DPD is, as much as he's been a terrific story here and as much as he would be valued around the NHL, I still wonder how quickly his trade value would have caught up with his actual reputation and how quickly he has hit at the North American level. Because sometimes there is a bit of a lag where some teams, even with the success he's had so far, look at him and go, you know, he's a third round pick. Maybe they still look at him and go, it's probably just gonna be a third pair guy, like a really good third pair guy.
Yeah.
But they may not look at
an
that
11th overall pick, right? Like,
yeah,
that's the difference.
Yeah. And they may not look at DPD and go, this is a player who's good enough to be the building block, the centerpiece of a return for a top 6 center. And of course, Canucks fans don't want to see either one moved. But if one does get moved, you obviously want the one that's going to fetch you the highest potential top 6 center back, and that may be Willander,
and give you similar outcomes. You know, with Pettersson, keeping Pettersson DPD next season. Okay, good stuff. Just ahead of Family Feud, I want to tell you about Greta, a great spot for all games. There's lots of games going on right now. You got baseball games, you've got the Stanley Cup playoffs, and Greta's a great spot to catch it all with plenty of big screen TVs, those beautiful booths. I never mentioned the booths. The booths are really nice. The bar, the arcade games, and of course the street food menu. I like the smash burger. Head on down to Greta today. Greta Bar, YVR, 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. Great spot to be. Okay, take it away. Technical producer, Jacob Lazar.
Welcome back to another edition of Canucks Conversation Family Feud. These guys have had a great season. If you remember all the way back in September, October, what was and we lost Harm here, but that's all right. I'm sure he will reconnect. It's fine. You're going first anyways. We went all the way back at the beginning of the season. You guys, I think we're like 2-5 or 1-5, and then a huge turnaround. You guys are going for your 19th win of the season here today. I don't want to comment on how difficult this one's going to be. Some questions are easy, lots of points out there. Some are a little tougher. So
people in the chat said it's hard. Said it's a hard one this week.
All right, there we go. Harm's back. Yeah, I think so. But like, there's a couple big number ones that if you hit those big number ones, you should be cruising. But yeah, without further ado, for those of you who are new, we play this every Thursday. Quad's going to go first. He'll have 25 seconds on the clock. If he can't think of an answer, he'll say pass. We'll come back to it at the end. All right, Quads, are you ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, your time will begin when I finish reading the first question. All right. Which regular Canucks forward, meaning will play 40 plus games, will have the fewest number of points next season?
Teddy Bluger.
Name another game show that Canucks Conversation could emulate this offseason.
Jeopardy.
Name an underrated Canucks first-round pick.
Pass.
Who was the best captain of the Vancouver Canucks?
Trevor Linden.
Which current Canuck would make the best baseball player?
Brock Besser.
Name an underrated Canucks first-round pick.
Cody Hodgson. I don't know.
I'll give it to you. I'll give
Sure.
it to you.
I don't think
Right.
that's going to get any. Wave in harm. Why can't I think of an answer for that? Okay, I guess I can't repeat the question. I got to think about that one. That one was hard. That one question was hard. Harm, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There's one question that's hard. You should be okay. We'll see how many points I got. That was not an easy one.
Yeah, this is one where one of your answers I actually have to search for because it wasn't in my top 6. So
yeah, that's a tough one. Oh, I guess I can. Okay. Okay. I came up with an answer, but I think it's too late.
yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, that one is really tough. But I think I know what the answer is going to be.
Overall, though, Quads, you did well. You got to 115 points.
Oh, great. I didn't think that was going to be the case. Awesome.
Yeah, so a very good start overall. And as we mentioned, there was one where you weren't in the top 6, so some points available there for Harmon.
Let's go, Harm.
All right. Harm's going to have 30 seconds on the clock. His time will begin when I finish reading the first question. Harm, if you need to pass, just say so. We'll come back to it at the end. Quads did have to pass, and he was able to get an answer in right at the buzzer. If you give one of Quad's answers, you'll hear the noise. There it is. And I'll ask you to try again. All right, Harmon, you ready to go?
Yep.
Which regular Canucks forward, and the qualification I'm using is playing 40 plus games, will have the fewest number of points next season?
Oh, man. Linus Karlsson.
Name another game show that Canucks Conversation could emulate this offseason.
Jeopardy.
Try again.
I don't know any other game shows. Wheel of Fortune.
Name an underrated Canucks first-round pick.
Corey Schneider.
Who was the best captain of the Vancouver Canucks?
Trevor Linden.
Try again.
Henrik Steen.
Which current Canuck would make the best baseball player?
Tyler Myers.
Tyler Myers.
Oh, he nails it. He nails it. That was great. That was great.
It was It was a rough start, Harm, but man, coming in flying to end that one in the last 15 seconds.
That was clutch. We won. You don't have to count it. It's all good.
I do need to count it.
I don't know,
but I am.
I don't know any other game shows. I butchered that answer.
Dude, it's Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy are 1 and 2. There's no, like, what are they gonna say? Deal or no deal? It's Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy 1, 2 for sure.
So we'll go through this regular Canucks forward. With the fewest number of points. I didn't have Karlsson in my top 6. I got to see if he's there. 1 point for Linus Karlsson. Arm. 29 points for Teddy Bluger, though, Quads. That was the number 1 answer. Drew O'Connor at number 2. Dakota Joshua at number 3. So some people not counting on a Joshua bounce back. Rounding out the top 5 was Nils Aman and Max Sasson. So some people thinking Sasson's going to get to the 40-game mark.
I wonder why Karlsson didn't get as many votes. Is it because they don't think he's going to get to 40 games?
That's
probably.
That's probably what I think.
Yeah. All right. Name another game show that the Canucks Conversation crew could emulate this offseason. Quads, Jeopardy was the number 1 answer. Harm, Wheel of Fortune was the number 3 answer. You got 11 points there.
What was number 2?
Price is Right.
No, wrong.
We talked about this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, but how can we play Price is Right? Tell me how Price is Right Canucks Convo works.
Oh, I'm sure we could do it. Like finding
what's the price of a practice facility?
There you go. Other ones in the list here were the Pyramid. Are you smarter than a 5th grader who wants to be a millionaire? There were some good ones in here too. Where was it? There was the Newlywed Game.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Password. There you go. Yeah, there were some good ideas here. We'll see. Maybe for some of those summer shows, we need something.
I think we should bust out Canucks Convo Jeopardy like next week.
Oh, I don't know about next week. I want to do it right. If we're doing it, I'm building the Jeopardy board. It's gonna have all the sound effects. We're gonna do it right. All right, name an underrated Canucks first round pick. Quads, you answered Cody Hodgson, so that's what I had to look up. Only 2 points for Cody Hodgson.
I can't believe you got points. I'll take it.
Arm, you got the number 6 answer, but only 5 points for Corey Schneider.
Is Jared McCann the number one answer?
Jared McCann is the number 1 answer.
Yeah. Okay. That was just,
I figured for underrated, the guy would have had to spend a long time actually playing here.
Dude, you don't have to explain yourself. I said Cody Hodgson.
Well,
continue.
When you look at the 1, 2, and 3, I mean, number 2 had a few years here. That's Michael Grabner, but really his career didn't take off till he left Vancouver. And number 3 is RJ Umberger, who spent the vast majority of his career elsewhere. So
RJ Umberger getting more than Corey Schneider hurts.
Yeah. And then Peter Nedved. Matthias Oland is the only one on this list. He was the number 4 answer who spent the majority of his career in Vancouver. So yeah, that was a tough one. There were a few really random ones in there. A couple of people answered.
I think we're in trouble, Buds.
Like
no, we're good.
Like how can I get that Quinn Hughes is the best defenseman and probably the best player to ever play for the Vancouver Canucks, but I don't know how you can call him an underrated first round pick at that point. But I guess he should have gone first overall, and we all know that.
Yeah.
All right. Who was the best captain of the Vancouver Canucks? Very specifically said was, because if I said is, it just all would have been Quinn Hughes. Number 1 answer, Quads, you hit that. That was Trevor Linden, of course. Harm, you did say Henrik Sedin, correct?
Yeah.
That's the number 2 answer. So 39 points and 27 points. So tough third round there, but you guys get the 1 and 2 here in round 4. Stan Smeal, number 3 answer. Marcus Naslund at 4, and Roberto Luongo in at number 5. So that was a fun one. And then a few people still said Quinn Hughes anyways. Which current Canuck would make the best baseball player? Quads, you said Brock Besser. Number 3 answer. Only 12 points, though. Harm, you need 41 points to get the win here. Man. You got the number 1 answer in Tyler Myers, but he only got you 22 points.
That's tough.
So it is a loss this time around. That was that third one, the underrated pick, right? If you guys had scooped up
that was tough.
Or Grabner, you guys would have been in a much better
That's
situation.
Okay.
But
we don't need to win every week. That was a good survey, and that was a good game.
Close one, hard fought.
Yep. We battled. That's all you can ask for is we battled.
Absolutely. Now I will say with the best baseball player, the number 4 answer was Kiefer Sherwood, but multiple people said Kiefer Sherwood because he's the hit king, which I thought was funny, mixing the sports a little bit there. Number 1 answer was Myers. Number 2 answer was Dakota Joshua. I mean, Joshua just seems like an all-around athletic guy. Of course, Quinn Hughes got some votes. I don't know how Quinn Hughes would do on a baseball field, but hey, he grew up all over the place, but did spend a lot of time in Michigan and Florida and 2 places where baseball is pretty popular. So you never know. I'm sure a lot of those American guys have played some little league back in their day and probably would have been solid baseball players had they not picked.
Are we in agreement that Nils Höglander would be the worst?
Yes. I don't think Nils Höglander's ever thrown a baseball in his life.
I'm curious if anyone answered with Höglander. I don't think
you know who wasn't good at baseball was the Sedins.
Really?
Did you know the story? Yeah.
No.
I can't remember who said it. One of their teammates was like, yeah, like they're oh no, it was Bieksa. It was Bieksa that said it because Henrik bet him that he could do like 1,000 keep-ups of a soccer ball. Remember? And then he did it. And then when he was at 800, Bieksa gave him his money and hit the ball away. And I think Bieksa said like, yeah, but he can't throw a baseball. So that was funny. Anyways, good survey. We did well. All right, let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by, fittingly, the Vancouver Canadians, who are back at the Nat this week with a 6-game homestand against the Hillsborough Hops. There was the Nooner at the Nat, which comes tomorrow, Friday, May 2nd. It's a great excuse to get the weekend started a bit early. You can then check out the White Spot Family Fun Sunday on May 4th, where kids get to run the bases post-game. And hey, it's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day at the Nat. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check out CanadiansBaseball.com. All right. I said we'd start with this one, so let's start with it. This is from Cynical in the chat, who said, how much different is the Canucks timeline if they had traded Miller instead of Horvat? I think that's a natural thing to wonder about, Harm, but I will say, and look, Not necessarily the number one JT Miller defender in the world, speaking right now, but I will also say, like, JT Miller did put up 103 points last season. Like, let's not forget that. And down the stretch, and hell, even into the playoffs, when Elias Pettersson was a no-show, like, JT Miller was the Canucks' top six. So we all enjoyed the playoffs last year. I don't know if Bo Horvat has that ceiling that we saw from JT Miller last year.
Yeah, it's also a tough scenario to work back from because the Horvat trade indirectly led to Filip Hronek. So would there have been a similar trade like two-step process that the Canucks would have executed for Miller, or is there a scenario where Miller would have been dealt at the previous trade deadline or in the previous offseason? Because remember, in the previous sort of summer, it was expected for a long time that Horvat was going to be the one that extended and that JT was going to be the one that was dealt. We wrote extensively about that. Even the national guys like Elliot Friedman were reporting that they expected JT to be more likely to be dealt than Bo. If you made the trade back then and dealt Miller, re-signed Horvat then, well, Filip Hronek wasn't available on the trade market at that time. And we know that because Jim Rutherford mentioned when the trade happened that they had been kicking tires on Hronek for a while, had been told he's not available by Steve Yzerman, and then Yzerman called them in the lead up to the deadline where they dealt Bo that, hey, he's available now. Are you guys still interested? So the timeline would have been different. So it's just hard to work backwards from that because there's no Filip Hronek then, and we know how instrumental he's been in stabilizing the blue line, unlocking the best version of Quinn Hughes. And ultimately, big picture, I don't know that the organization is that much better off if they have Bo Horvat instead of JT Miller.
It's just an interesting thing to think about because especially with, there's already people in the chat as well talking about bringing Bo Horvat back. And we've talked about it on this show, obviously, but it's interesting that you're at that road now where you're saying, would it be the worst thing in the world if Bo Horvat was back here in Vancouver? And I don't think the answer is no when it comes to that. So it's an interesting one, but you're right. It is difficult to work backwards on it. I want to talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs because unfortunately our Montreal Canadiens, we were all rooting for them on this show. The Montreal Canadiens fell to the Washington Capitals. A really hard fought series by the Habs. Jacob, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I mean, I mentioned this on the show a couple shows ago. Like, it was a 5-game series, but it really didn't feel like a 5-game series. Like, it felt like probably a hard-fought 6-gamer. And, just Dobish wasn't bad when he came in for Montreal, but he wasn't going to play to the level that Montembeault was. And when Thompson avoided serious injury, when it looked like his playoffs could be done, it was going to be a tall order for Montreal to overcome that without their number one goalie. And Logan Thompson, obviously, he's finished the season, with a few question marks around him, fair enough, based on how he started the year. But I think we can all comfortably say that when you have Logan Thompson between the pipes, he's going to give you better, more consistent goaltending than rookie Jakub Dobesh would. And with Montreal, they weren't going to really match up against that high-powered Washington Capitals team. They were going to rely on their goaltending to keep them in it. And, unfortunately, without Montembeault, it just wasn't in the cards. But hey, you know what? It was a great season for Montreal. Their young guys got another taste of playoff hockey. They got to play in front of a 21,000 fan Bell Center in the postseason, and it's just going to set them up hopefully for a long stretch of competitive, contending hockey out of Montreal.
Panthers Lightning. Do we all agree that the Panthers are just going to win the cup? They just steamrolled the Tampa Bay Lightning, who, Tampa Bay Lightning were a top 4 team heading into the playoffs, at least I think, based on talent and what they were able to do. And the Panthers made them look like they were the Senators. I can't believe what we saw from the Panthers. And actually, I can believe it, but I thought it was definitely going to be a closer series than it ended up being. The Panthers just look like they're just going to steamroll everyone to the cup.
It should be terrifying because the biggest fear for the Panthers was health, was durability. Tkachuk hadn't played since 4 Nations. A bunch of their guys had been a little bit banged up down the stretch. And the Panthers lost a lot of games through the final month of the season. So you wondered, are they going to be able to flip that switch? Are they going to be healthy enough? Is the fatigue from not just a deep cup run last year, but also making the Stanley Cup final the previous year when they lost to Vegas, have they logged too many hard miles, this core, to the point where it's going to hinder their ability to match up against an elite Lightning team? And they flipped that switch. Tkachuk was effective through the series. All their top guys came through, and really the big difference is their depth. How many teams can roll out Brad Marchand on their third line? Luosterainen is one of the most underrated players in the league. Lundell in that spot too, and that's where Tampa, without Bjorkstrand for the series, without Brandon Hagel towards the end, just couldn't match the depth, especially when you also had Nikita Kucherov shut down, didn't score in that series, and most importantly too, Vasilevsky was, I shouldn't say most importantly, but it does matter that Vasilevsky was a bit of a letdown. That was a big reason why I thought the Lightning could win that series and why I originally picked them to win in 7 is Vasilevsky had like a .930 save percentage over his last 30 games the regular season, and I thought single-handedly he's in that form that he was when Tampa Bay won those Stanley Cups, but he didn't have a great series. He was outdueled by Bobrovsky, and when you combine it with all the other factors, yeah, the Panthers look absolutely terrifying.
Moving along here, the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg Jets found a new strategy to win hockey games in the playoffs. Just make sure Connor Hellebuyck doesn't face many shots. He still lets in an absolutely brutal goal. I don't know. Playoff Hellebuck's a real thing, right? Do we all agree? Playoff Hellebuyck is a legit, is a real thing.
And Harm just mentioned that Vasilevsky was bad in the playoffs too. Like, those were the two best goalies in the NHL this season, and both have been mediocre at very best in the playoffs this year.
I still take Vasilevsky over Hellebuyck. What Vasilevsky did in the first round compared to what Hellebuck's doing? Like, Hellebuyck, even last night, the game he doesn't get pulled in, didn't get pulled in the start all season, worth mentioning. He's been pulled in 2 so far in the first round. That one against Snuggerud, like, you're losing your post. Honestly, it reminded me. Do you remember when Mikey DiPietro had to make his? Of course you remember. Well, he had to make his NHL debut, and he was like so nervous, and was a junior hockey goalie, just trying to keep up to the speed of the NHL. Like, that's what it looked like with Hellebuyck on that goal. I was just like, where are you going? You know where your post, or at least you should know where your post is, and he just completely. It was just so weird. It was so strange, and I gotta think it's mental. Like, I used to think it was about, teams expose how the Jets allow a lot of east-west movement, and east-west movement increases in the playoffs, and that becomes harder for the Jets to contend with, and that's Hellebuck's weakness. Like, I think it might just be a mental thing.
If you're the Jets, do you agree that if you advance past St. Louis and make it to round 2, that you'd rather play Dallas than Colorado?
Yes. Absolutely. And it goes to what I just said. East-west movement.
Yeah, I mean, the Stars, especially without Robertson, they've played really well, considering they don't have Heiskanen, considering they don't have Robertson, but that team doesn't have the same explosive top of the lineup scoring that Colorado obviously does. I know Cale Makar is having a quiet series, but the thought of a rematch between the Jets and the Avalanche, even though the Jets had another terrific regular season, Hellebuck's current form would make me worry. And look, a series against the Stars too, I would lean towards the Stars winning that series right now if I had to pick between that hypothetical matchup, especially if they get Heiskanen back. But at least against the Stars, they're not as laden with superstars, and I think that would shelter Hellebuyck a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, his form so far is absolutely worrying if you're a Winnipeg fan that has been hoping that this is the year where they can make a cup run.
I wanted to talk about tonight's slate. I don't think we have to preview each game. The Leafs are just like are the Leafs going to do it, Harm? Are the Leafs really going to do it? Are they going to blow the 3-0 series lead to the Sens?
I want to say yes. But part of me still thinks I feel like the storyline of them blowing a 3-0 lead is too good to be true.
Yeah.
Like, there are certain things that are just in life too good to be true. And
Yeah.
I feel like for the hockey world to see the Leafs melt down a 3-0 series lead to the Ottawa Senators, who haven't made the playoffs before this in 7 years, I think that storyline is a little bit too good to be true.
And also, we're a better team since we've been coached by Craig Berube. So I think we're gonna come together and close it out. In all seriousness, I do think the Leafs do figure out how to win one of these games. But seriously, going into a game, because they're in Ottawa tonight, okay? Going into a game 7, all the pressure is on the Leafs, and it goes back to what I said before this even started, that like the Sens are gonna have nothing to play for. They're literally just gonna be like, we have nothing to lose, lots to play for, nothing to lose. That they would just be going out there and playing, whereas the Leafs are all worried about storylines and all this other stuff going on. And yeah, the pressure is definitely on. But they've got it. They should have enough. Like, they've got Craig Berube, they've got Chris Tanev. You'd hope they have enough to close it out, or maybe you don't hope. But
two insane stats for you. This Leafs core 1-13 in elimination games. They've lost 13 of 14 elimination games.
Like closeout games where they can eliminate the opponent is what we're talking about. Closeout games. And
the score tweeted out that in series clinching games, the Leafs are 0 for 30. 0 for their last 30 on the power play. So 30 power play opportunities, assuming they're all 2-minute opportunities. That's 60 minutes, an entire game worth of power play time in these elimination games where they haven't scored a single goal.
That doesn't seem good.
Doesn't seem like they have the dog in them, but we'll see.
No, dogless Leafs. Okay. Speaking of dogs, my dog's been sleeping on the couch this whole show, and he hasn't. I was waiting for him to bark. He's been barking all day, but hasn't barked yet. He's just sleeping. So, all right. I don't know. Okay, we'll talk about the other games tomorrow. We need something to talk about on Friday. I wanted to mention this: the Vancouver Whitecaps. My Vancouver Whitecaps. I'm cheering for them now. I'm really rooting for these guys. They take down Lionel Messi and Inter Miami in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Did I get all of that information right, Jacob?
You got all of that information correct.
All of that information right. In Miami, they upset them, and now they're going to the basically Stanley Cup final. They're going to the big dance. This is a huge deal for them, for the franchise. Jacob, can I go watch the games? Like, where do I watch the games? How does this work? Is it on TSN, and then can I just go to the not the rink, the field?
The game. So the games haven't been on TSN. I don't know about the final, if it's going to get picked up. It's been on One Soccer, which is where a lot of like Canadian
what the hell's One Soccer? What's One Soccer?
It's a streaming service.
Oh,
yeah.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious. But the final might end up on actual television. I don't know. We don't know. The other semifinal, second leg, goes today between Tigres and Cruz Azul, both out of Mexico. And I don't remember which team it was, but if one of those teams wins, they would host the final. But if the other team wins, then the Whitecaps would host the final. It's based on like your results throughout the whole tournament for who gets to host it. So yes, there is a chance that this final championship game gets played at BC Place, in which case, you know what, just go to the game. Then you don't have to worry about where it's being televised. But yeah, it is a pretty big deal. And obviously, just within MLS itself, the Whitecaps are still by far and away the best team in MLS. They went out and between the Inter Miami Cup games, I forget who it was they beat. Might have been Minnesota, and they went on the road, won like 4-1 with basically all of their backups starting the game. So this team is pretty special. If you're even just like a remotely interested in soccer, give the Whitecaps a watch, because they're an exciting team. And at this point, they're Vancouver's best shot at winning not just a championship, but potentially multiple championships this season.
If I know we don't know their opponent yet, but are the Whitecaps expected to be significant underdogs in the final? Like, how do they potentially profile against some of these, like the two Mexican clubs?
Jacob, I don't think he was asking me.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's again, this is a tournament that's just always dominated by the Mexican clubs. Normally, you would say that hey, especially the Whitecaps, kind of like, a notorious middle of the road MLS team, goes on this run and they're going to be heavy underdogs in the final, but they've been pretty clearly one of the top teams in this tournament. They had a couple hiccups early on where they were giving up some goals. I want to say it was, I forget which team it was that they played in the quarterfinal, but they had a 3-3 draw where, those goals allowed are basically what could prevent them from hosting this championship game. But it's hard to say. Like, I don't follow the Liga MX, so I don't know how these teams are, what to expect. But in general, you would say the MLS team is always going to be the underdog in a championship game against a team from Liga MX. But hey, I think the Whitecaps are perfectly fine. The Whitecaps were technically the underdog against Miami, and they beat them 5-1 on aggregate. So I think it's pretty clear that they're comfortable playing from that underdog position.
Just Vancouver's best chance at a trophy. Someone said it in the chat as well. Just go win something. Go win something, Vancouver. You know who's winners? The Vancouver Whitecaps and the Vancouver Canadians. Those are the winning teams right now. And hey, the Vancouver Warriors. I also should mention the Warriors. We were hopeful to have Kurt Milosky on. I don't really know the NLL schedule, so I keep throwing out dates. And Carl, their PR guy, great. He does a great job. Carl's awesome. A few times we've texted back and forth. I'm like, hey, can we do this? He's like, we play this day, or we're traveling this day. And I'm like, all right, I'll look at the schedule and figure out a day. But we are, because Kurt said, for those of you that heard the interview last week, like Kurt said, I'd love to come back. And I said, anytime. I'm holding up my end of the bargain. I'm not flying anywhere.
And for those who want to know, tomorrow series opens up in Buffalo, Vancouver at Buffalo. Sunday, they're back in Vancouver, 6:00 start at Rogers Arena. And if necessary, Game 3 would go Saturday, May 10th, back out in Buffalo. So there's the Vancouver Warriors schedule.
There you go, Vancouver Warriors. And we're going to have Kurt back on the show. That's what I was trying to get to. We're going to have Kurt back on next week. And tomorrow, Victor Mancini joins the show. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And the Abbotsford Canucks kick off their second round against Coachella Valley tonight. So that preview is over on CanucksArmy.com right now. Victor Mancini joins the show tomorrow. Let's close it out with our Bet365 bet of the day. I don't know, man. I don't like that the Senators are favorites. I feel like that's a little too... We're not taking the Senators as favorites. We're taking...
Your Leafs?
Yeah, we're taking my Leafs, the underdog Leafs. No, the books are doubting us. Everybody's doubting us. We bleed blue. I can't even say this with a straight face. We're taking the Leafs money line, minus 105. They are the underdogs. You can get that over on Bet365. Want to get on the action for Stanley Cup playoffs? At Bet365, they've got you. From game props, player props, totals, and the money line, you can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, the Stanley Cup champions, and much, much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 90 plus play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, like I said, Victor Mancini on the show tomorrow. Hopefully we're talking about an Abbotsford Canucks victory, but regardless, very excited to chat with the Canucks blue liner tomorrow. But we will close it out there for my co-host Harmon Dial and our technical producer Jacob Lazar. My name is Dave Wajelli. Thanks so much for the episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.